All right, this video is for the Salt Lake Community College 1130 Architectural Basic Drawing class. And today we're going to be doing a demonstration sketch in pen. And this will be the background or the sketch that we'll be doing. And we'll use these materials that we have here. In order to do this class, you'll need your straight edge, your parallel ruler would work great, or just any sort of a small ruler or straight edge that you have. You're going to need two different pens, a thin and a thick pen type. You'll also just need the background that's posted with the assignment. Looks like this. And then you will also just need a blank piece of copy or print paper in order to do the assignment. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on that. This is just an example of this sketch that I've done before. We're going to do something slightly different from this today. But it's one of my favorites to do with a straight edge and using a mechanical line because of just kind of the sharp edges and the nice long straight lines that we have here. So I'm going to demonstrate using a mechanical line because I haven't done anything like that. We'll end up adding a little bit of variable line in here, just some trees and things, maybe some bushes, just so that it creates some more of use of the Michelin techniques that we've been discussing and studying in class. All right, so again, you're going to take your background, print that out, and you're going to use this just to sketch over the top. Again, we're just using this for a couple more class times in order to help you create the background, the construction line drawing without having to worry about scale and proportion too much as you're kind of just building up your skills. So you take that, and then you're going to go over the top of that with your copy paper, and we're just going to do a quick outline drawing. Now for your outline drawing, I forgot to mention this beginning, but you may use pencil. For many years I did use pencil. I think I will today just as the demonstration. And then those lines will erase if you want to later. Although if you've learned to take your pen and draw really quickly and be able to do light lines with that, again using that edge technique or just being able to draw the line very quickly in order to create a nice light fuzzy line, you can just start with pen and work from there too. It took me quite a while to build up my confidence to where I've started to use just pen from the get-go, but you can use pencil, and sometimes I still go back to that too. So I'm just going to use my pencil here, and we're going to go through here, and I will just create kind of that quick outline, construction line drawing of this background. I like this background too, just because it's a change up from that little house that we've been doing a lot of, and this is much more of a modern design to it. And again, just as a reminder, this step is really kind of mimicking what you would do out in the field when you're drawing something. It's also very similar if you, as you're going through and even drawing something out of your head, you're not going to start with all of your very dark and adding detail. You need to sort of build up to that. So you start with very sort of a light, quick lines as you're just kind of figuring out where things go, very sketchy, light lines until you really figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to create. And then you go back in and you add your details. And I'm using this mechanical edge. in order to create a very sharp drawing. And that's just kind of reflective of the subject matter that we're drawing. So I know we've gone through, what is it, 45 Michelin techniques plus the one bonus one that I gave you in class. But just because there's 45 techniques doesn't mean you need to use all 45 on every sketch. But what we are doing is figuring out which techniques are best for the type of drawing that we want, that best reflects the subject matter that we're drawing, and then using those techniques to best demonstrate or illustrate the drawing and the subject matter. So this particular one I feel lends itself very well to using a straight edge and mechanical line technique because of the sharp lines that it has. Okay, so there's my rough outline. I think I forgot that line right there. So there's my rough outline of my drawing, and I did forget. There's kind of my rough outline of the drawing. So once I've got my construction line outline, then take the background, and you don't need that anymore. So that can just kind of go away and off to somewhere else. Okay, so the next step is always to start building up, right, to create some tone and texture. What that means in pen, though, is we typically start with our lines and use that to start sort of building up our drawing here. So I'm just going to start doing that. And the technique that I like with pen, and especially when we're using my straight edge, is creating what I call thick thin lines. And by that I mean that I'm going to go from a really thick edge at one side, and then I'm going to have that be lighter as I come down here. So see how I get a nice thick line there? Just zoom in on that real quick. And then I'm letting that kind of trail off as it comes down the line. And then I come down to the other end, and this is also a way that I can create some not gradual value change, excuse me, hit go hit by emphasizing the beginning and the end of the line. Now this isn't the only technique. Obviously a lot of the techniques that we've used with pencil you can do in pen. If I was doing this freehand, this would look much more in many ways like a pencil drawing rather than a pen drawing. But for this one, I'm just going to kind of show you a slightly different way to do this. So again, emphasizing the beginning and the end of the line to use hit go hit, but just in a slightly different way. And this pen is really great. I love it because it's almost starting to die off, which means to get that nice fuzzy line works really well, but it's a little bit harder to get the nice dark pen line. So I'm going to switch to a newer pen here, and you can see kind of how that works differently. Right. So what I'm doing here is I'm just picking up my straight edge, and I just change the angle just a little bit, so I go thick here, and then it bleeds down into a thin line down here at the other end. And again, remembering that overlap corner, letting these be kind of nice, bold overlap corners. Okay, and I'm leaving some gaps. Notice that in here you've got some spaces where there are gaps, which is that nice professional gap portion. I'm not going to worry too much about a professional dot on this one. Maybe I'll come back and add a few. Alright, so here we are with the sketch. Sorry about that interruption. But I've moved forward just a little bit and started to kind of create some of these other lines in here and just building up. So I'm just continuing to kind of do my line work as I was showing earlier and just create these. These here are little just sort of awnings. I guess that's what you call them, shades. Kind of sunshade devices on here. Right there. And over here we've just got a line there, and then we've got our, again, using kind of that hit go hit cut technique to emphasize the beginning and end of the line. I'm leaving some gaps a few places in those lines. So there's just a little bit of that build up there. So let's move over to a couple of lines that go along the ground. And one of the things that I really like to do, in fact, let me switch over to my felt, is really create like a nice thick heavy line that goes to a really thin line that comes out. So kind of show you how I would do that here. So I'm going to start down here and just create that line. And again, I'm kind of lifting that up, and then I change that angle just a little bit and do that. So it's coming down to that thin. And then here. All right, so there's that. Sorry, off the page. I'll have to do that again for you. So again, what I've done is I've kind of created a nice thick line down to a thin line here. So let me show you how I did that here. So start with this kind of that first line that goes across here that defines the line, and I'm just again lifting that pencil as I come down, and it makes that nice soft line to it. And I take my straight edge and I maybe leave this where it's at that point, but then I take this end and just pull it down just a little bit. Right, and then I just use that to kind of create this next little angle. Right, and then just by doing that, notice I can go from a nice thick line to a thin line that comes right down there. So let's do this here. Maybe a little less so. I'm going to switch back to my regular pen here. Find that line. And this is the one that's pretty much dead. I hold on to those pens as they die because they actually can create a really nice soft line without really trying, because they're almost dead and they just automatically create that soft line that we're kind of looking for. So notice how that lift up technique is very important in pen. In order to get that trailing off of the lines, you've got to be able to take your pen and lift it as you go along, even when you're using a straight edge like this, just to create that nice heavy beginning and a soft end to your line. Sorry to emphasize both the beginning and the end. Okay, so there's just kind of our quick start to this, and so let's add just a little bit of shading. And with this one, I really like to just create some really nice sort of dark areas, again, to kind of emphasize these lines. So I'm going to switch back to my felt tip pen here, and we're going to create, let's say the light's coming from my upper right hand side here of my paper. And so it'll create just kind of a shadow line in my windows here, in this window that's there. So if I create that shadow line by just making that, those two sides just a nice thick heavy line like that, and then I'm going to do the same thing under here. And then just to emphasize these, I'm going to do these just as really short lines so that those shades kind of come through. Right, like that. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about gradual value change and just doing some shading on here, which will be a little different than the example that I showed you before. But I'm going to switch over to freehand here for just a second. Again, I'm going to find that angle right there. Right. Angle right where that is barely putting down any sort of pen or any sort of the ink from the pen, because I just want a very nice sort of light. You can use your straight edge for this if you don't feel confident with your ability to just kind of do nice straight lines. I'm just going to create just a little bit of value on this face here, which would be in the shadow. Excuse me, it'd be in the shade side of the building. Okay, just something very simple like that. Now in here, I'm going to zoom in on that and I'll just show you what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to do some vertical lines, but I'm going to keep them very, very close together. You can see how if you've got to a point where you feel comfortable with your freehand and be able to start and stop these lines where you want to, this works pretty well here. I'm just going to go through here and do each one of these as quick as I can. Normally I would do something the whole face, but with these little sunshades you kind of need to emphasize each one of them. So by just shading in between them, it'll kind of help create that emphasis that we want, or let those little light thin white lines kind of come through. And even though that they're very thin, your eye will actually pick up on that, and this will kind of help reinforce that. So I'm doing something here that I don't like when I do it, but something that I've talked to you about avoiding. So they're what I call fish hooks. So when you do your lines, you want to be able to lift that up so you just get a nice straight edge to it. When you start to go quickly, you start to do something that's like this. right? And you kind of come back on yourself. And it creates a little emphasis at the end, and to me it looks like a little fish hook, so I call these fish hooks. And the faster you go, the more apparent those are. You can kind of see them there. Once I zoom up in on there, you can see those little fish hooks kind of happening. Try to avoid that as much as possible, unless for some reason you want that technique as you're drawing, but for the most part, I think you really want to just try to keep these straight. These shorter lines are harder to keep. Just straight little lines, but I'm going to do a couple more times here. Okay. Now notice how I've kind of started to lose those lower lines, but under each one of those shading devices there'd be a little shadow. So if I just come with my felt tip now and create a nice sort of a dark line underneath each one of those. So I'm just on the underside of that line, I'm just creating that nice and thick line, thick heavy line there. Okay, so that begins to emphasize that. All right, so then let's hit this surface here, and I'm just gonna kind of do the same thing, but now use that, just go along that surface to emphasize that that's just a little bit flatter. Okay, so then down under here I've got this surface that I just want to create a little bit of value on here. And this will have a little bit of gradual value change, darker towards the top and lighter as I come down. And same with this leg right here. And then back here you've got this wall, this supporting wall that's back here. And trying to keep this at that 45-degree angle. Create just a little bit of gradual value change as I come across here. And with this one, maybe I can come with a little bit more, some vertical. All right, like that. Okay, now let's just play just a little bit with some shadows, some more shadows. So this upper building would cast some shadow onto here. So one of the things that you can do is kind of create, just using this right here, create just a little bit of a line. It's almost just sort of a little stopping line for me. All right, and then I can come along and I'm going to switch to my felt tip pen here. And I'm just going to use a vertical line and use that line that I just drew just sort of as a little stopping point. Notice that that ends up just pretty much disappearing. And this just kind of creates that nice sort of a shadow line coming across there. Okay. Now, if the sun's coming from this direction, then these here would cast the shadow. So I'm going to use my straight edge here, and again just kind of lift that pencil, or it's the pencil, so used to that, lift that pen up as I come along and just start there at the bottom and then pull that across, and it creates this nice little shadow and it gets that gradual value change underneath there. Like that. Okay, then I'm just going to come in here and now I'm just going to emphasize a few lines. to make these a little bit darker and heavier, and just add a few little bits of detail. Just in a couple places where I feel like I need some more definition. Right. And again, I like to keep this one very simplified, so I think I'm just gonna almost call it quits here. I'm just going to till I kind of saw this line back here. I'd emphasize that just a little bit more, and just call that something like that. That good for today. No variable line in here. I'm going to show you just a couple of examples for you to use on your other sketches that you'll do. So you have this sketch that you'll do, and then I'll have you do 2 other practice sketches. Don't forget to add your name and the date. I can't remember today's date. It's 13th. 12th, I can't remember. Okay. And make sure you have that on each one of your drawings. So you'll do one using this background, and then I want you to do 2 others, and I'll have you do the 2 others that are kind of more a familiar background. So here's an example of the little schoolhouse one. So that's an example. You can pause here and take a look at it if you want to use that as an example. But you can see here kind of the variable line here in the background of the trees, kind of how I did that. So you can use that as an example. And then this will be the other one, again, the one that we're very familiar with. Both of these were done freehand, and so it gives you kind of that look. But again, you can see the variable line with a thin line and then a thicker line up in here. Just to let you know, I did use a little bit of gray marker on this. This is how I kind of got some of that tone that you can see in here if you zoom in on that. But I did use just a little bit of marker there to create that. So, but you don't have to do that. Just go ahead and create everything that's underneath that using the pen, using the thin and the thick lines. So, all right, good luck. And as always, if you have any questions, just send me a message through Canvas. Thanks.